topic was because animal welfare is a growing field right now. From animal managers to the public to pretty much anybody that's involved in animals right now, they're becoming increasingly concerned with how those animals are treated. This is a result of not only more public awareness of how animals are treated, but also greater knowledge of the extent of animal cognition and emotions in animals. Right now, the trend in much animal management and training has been to shift from training scheme based on punishment and negative reinforcement to positive reinforcement. This is seen very clearly in industries such as zoos, in guide dog training, and military dog training. Much of those schools, much of those areas have shifted to positive reinforcement. In the equine world, however, there's been a lot of resistance to shifting to this change. There's a couple different reasons we think this has occurred. Not only are a lot of trainers simply happy with the methods they're using and don't see a reason to switch, but they're also concerned with a sort of convenience factor. A lot of trainers in dog positive training carry a clicker, and a lot of horse trainers don't want to have an additional piece of equipment. They also don't want to carry treats, just adding another thing. The other reason that there's been resistance in the equine industry is because there is a sort of common knowledge that says if you feed your horse treats, then it's going to start bothering you, bugging you, or mugging you. However, an online survey of equine, of horse owners and trainers found that there was no correlation between using clicker training and instances of aggressive behaviors, of biting, nudging, other sort of behaviors. So we wanted to see if this survey's results could actually be replicated in an experimental process. So we had two main objectives for our research. The first was, does the type of bridging stimulus impact training time? So a bridging stimulus is a marker that marks an event that an animal does that's desirable and the presentation of a food reward. An easy way to understand this is to pretend that you're a marine mammal trainer. You're trying to train your dolphin to jump out of the water. It'd be very, very difficult to try to throw a fish to the dolphin right when it jumps out of the water. It would also be difficult to try to use punishment or negative reinforcement to get your dolphin to jump out of the water. So what marine mammal trainers do is they pair the sound of a whistle with the presentation of a fish. Then when the dolphin or other marine mammal jumps out of the water, as soon as they're jumping out of the water, they blow that whistle, the animal re-enters the water, swims over to the trainer, and the animal knows that it's receiving the fish because of the fact that it jumped through the water. So this can kind of be expanded to many types of behaviors: a dog sitting, a horse putting its head down, in this case touching a target. And a lot of different types of bridging stimuli are used. In, again, zoos and marine mammal training, a lot of times they use whistles. In dog training, they use clickers. Sometimes in dog training, they use the word good. And there's been research shown that with dogs, using the word good results in dogs training slower than using the mechanical clicker because they think the word good is a little less consistent, it's a little longer, it's a little bit harder to mark. So we were interested in looking at comparing using the mechanical clicker versus using an auditory, a human-produced click that sounds like this, or simply not having that bridging stimuli. The other part of our project was to look at that mugging behavior in horses and see if it's actually correlated with feeding horses during training. So we made sure that none of the horses were fed any treats during the period of the study except for when they were being trained. So the only time the horses ever got food was after they heard that bridging stimulus or saw the hand going to the bag. And so we wanted to evaluate the horses to see if this was true or not. So now we kind of split this into two projects, and Katie's going to start off explaining the first part of the project, which looked at the different bridging stimuli.
During our project, we used 18 different horses. They were divided into 3 groups based on bridging stimuli. The first group used the mechanical bridging stimulus made by a clicker. The second group used the human-produced bridging stimulus made by an engine. And the last group was our control group. They had no auditory bridging one of our horses, Glory, in the training session. Overall, her training session was about 18 minutes long, so we shortened it into little clips so you could see an example of each level. And if you listen, she's in the mechanical group. That's her in level 1, then level 2, and you'll see her turn her head into level 2 in this next one, but because she's in level 3, she won't be rewarded until she turns her head all the way to level 3. So that's her in level 3. Then she skips level 4, goes into level 5. Next she'll touch level 6. And then level 7. Once you touch the tennis ball 5 times within 1 minute, she will have met behavioral acquisition and her training session will be complete. And throughout the training sessions, I recorded the time it took the horse to train the behavior, the number of treats used, and their progression throughout the levels. For example, a lot of horses would get stuck between level 3 and 4 because they'd have to switch from just turning their head to actually touching the pole.
So after we conducted this experiment, we trained 18 different horses to do this exact same behavior. We put the data into the computer, we looked at the total training time, and we started to analyze it. Just to get you a little bit more oriented, on the y-axis we have the time to behavioral acquisition. This means the time until the horses touch that tennis ball 5 times within 1 minute. And on the bottom we have bridging stimuli. This part was horses that were the control group, had that visual bridging stimuli, those with the human-produced bridging stimuli, and those with mechanical-produced stimuli. So you can see from this graph that there was a difference between the different bridging stimuli times, but we did not find that this difference was statistically significant. Mostly it depended on the individual horse at how long it took them to be trained. Additionally, because we used a standardized training procedure to try to remove trainer bias, some horses didn't work very well with that procedure. They would have done a lot better had they been trained with a non-standardized procedure. So what this means is that horse trainers should feel that if they're going to train something where they're going to be relatively close to their horse, that they either do not have to use a bridging stimulus at all, they can just move their hand and deliver the food, or they can use that human-produced bridging stimuli, so that they don't have to feel that they need to carry the clicker with them. Now another sort of information that we found for our project that was kind of interesting is we looked at the training time and the age of the horse in years. You've probably heard that it's hard to train an old dog to do new tricks. You can't train old dogs to do new tricks, but in general it's been found that puppies, that children learn a lot faster. And we found a similar sort of correlation with horses. It wasn't a great correlation. The p-value was a little bit greater than 0.05, but it would be interesting to replicate this project with more horses and have maybe the 2 different groups and see if younger horses do in fact learn faster. So now Katie's going to talk a little bit about the other part of our project. Just to remind you guys, our objective was to determine if using food-based positive reinforcement in training would increase unwanted oral investigative behaviors.
So the horse's behavior was evaluated before and after the training sessions. They are put into an arena with Megan on a libro, and every 10 seconds their behavior is recorded for 5 minutes. The behavior was later ranked on severity. So obviously if the horse used its teeth on Megan's skin, it would have a lot worse score than if it's used its nose on Megan's tree bag. You'll now see a video of one of our horses, Edda, in her behavior evaluations. Before, you can see she spends most of her time bugging Megan with her nose on the tree bag, whereas after, she is interested in the tree bag, but she spends most of her time away from the handler. During the 5 minutes, the horse can have up to 30 unwanted behaviors. Before, Edda had 21, and after she only had 4. Later, these behaviors were ranked based on severity. So Edda's score went up to 43 because she had a couple of instances of using her teeth on Megan's skin or her teeth on Megan's tree bag. Afterwards, her severity was still at 4 because her unwanted behaviors were only her nose on Megan's tree bag.
So as you could see from that video, there was clearly a very great improvement from the individual before training and after training. And this is pretty interesting because during the actual training, we never specifically told the horses, you're not supposed to put your mouth or on me or on my tree bag. We never punished the horses for doing this. The only thing is if they did get a little bit more aggressive, I would step away and remove myself because I don't want to get bit all day. And touch the target only took about 5 seconds. A lot of horses, when they got in that arena for the behavior testing afterwards, were very confused. They would turn their head away, expect to get a treat, and when they didn't, they would get a little frustrated. And so we saw a little bit more unwanted behaviors than we think we could have. However, when we did look at this using statistical data, you can see this is their unwanted oral behavior score, and this is their data before and after. When you just look at the raw number of unwanted behaviors, it went from about 15 unwanted behaviors to about 10. And when you ranked that for severity, so biting the treat bag was a very common one, it decreased from about a score of 28 to a score of about 20. And so we were pretty excited to see this result. This is very contrary to what that common knowledge says, that using food in training is actually going to increase those behaviors. The horses actually learned the more that you trained them, that would decrease these behaviors. And we think that if you continue training your horses during this method, you would only have greater and greater decreases. So just as a review, our conclusion was to determine if the type of bridging stimulus impacts training time, and we found that with little lag time, bridging stimulus does not. Just to kind of expand upon that, the lag time is the time between that bridging stimulus and presentation of a food report. We think that if the trainer was maybe on top of the horse, where the horse could not see them reach into that treat bag, or if they were at some distance from the horse, where they'd have to walk over and give that treat, that in that case, maybe the auditory bridging stimuli would be better. We also looked at, does using food-based positive reinforcement increase unwanted behaviors, and we said no, it does not. It decreases the behaviors. So the implications of this is that positive reinforcement can be utilized without fear of increasing those unwanted behaviors and without that inconvenience factor. In the future, we wanted to see those different training schemes, try to be far away from the horse, or maybe sit on the horse to do that. We also looked at positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, and we have a poster in the South Georgian room at 3:30, and we'd love to see you there. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
We've got room for about 1 or 2 questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer your questions at their poster session too. Do you have any questions that they could answer quickly?
The difference in your response to the bridging stimulus, you go into your pocket, could it be the auditory? You showed an age differential, or close, pretty close, 0.06. I mean, could it be auditory as they get older?
Oh. Well, that included horses that had the auditory bridging stimulus and just the visual. So we have to kind of repeat it with all the different types of bridging stimulus, but that's definitely an interesting hypothesis.
Have you ever tried to do the stimulus without giving the reward every time? So that the clicker itself was a stimulus?
Not in this training scheme. I personally have trained, and I don't give a food reward every time, and it works fine. You just have to keep that bridging stimulus to have some value.
Does that extinguish unwanted behavior at a greater pace? Or?
I think having it every time would extinguish that behavior faster.
Okay, well, we're out of time to stay on the schedule. We can't take any more questions right now, but they will be at the poster sessions. If you have some lingering questions, you can find them there. Thank you, ladies.